Hello, Mason here. Baked potatoes have always been a staple in my family. We have them all the time. But there's this recipe that we have that makes them a little bit better and takes them to the next level. What we do is we bake the potato twice. And here's how we do it. To begin with, we're going to need some potatoes. These are russet baking potatoes, and typically potatoes that are made for baking make good twice baked potatoes. So I'm just going to get these out of the foil here, and then I'm going to clean up the potatoes. These have been sitting out for a little while, so they're starting to kind of sprout a little bit. So I'm just going to use my hand and just kind of peel off all the little sprouts on the potatoes, because you don't really want to have those on there when you're making your twice baked potatoes. Now I'm just going to throw these all in the colander, head over to the sink, and I'm going to wash them. These come from the store. They're supposed to be ready to eat. They just kind of bake them then eat them, but I've never had the best of luck with that. So I'm just washing them out by hand. And I think as potatoes go, you can always usually give them another clean because they're always so dirty. I guess a lot of that comes down to the fact that they grow in the dirt. So it's only natural that they get covered in dirt. And firm scrubbing with the hands is usually enough to get off whatever's left on them, and then I'm just drying these off with paper towel just to kind of make sure that they're all perfectly clean. Ideally, you would like any potato that you bake for you to be able to eat the skin. Okay, let's do our first baking now. So I get out the cooking sheet. I don't really need the sill mat here, but I've already got it down, so why not? And now we're gonna take our fork and we're gonna prick holes inside of our potatoes. Now, if you don't prick holes in your potatoes, they explode. Seriously, they explode. I know firsthand. At least if you're baking them in the oven, it's, they explode. It doesn't really make as big of a mess as, let's say, you did it in your microwave. That can be pretty bad to do. So, prick some holes in them and you'll be safe. That allows the steam to come out of the potatoes when they cook. Because if you don't do that, the steam builds up and they explode. I'm just using some high temperature oil here, some avocado oil. You could also use olive oil if you want, but depends on what your cooking temperature is. If you're going to cook them at high temp, 450, which they bake a lot faster like that, then using a high temp oil is probably better, but I usually do everything at like 300, 350. And that's what I'm going to do for these. I'm just going to bake them at 350, so I could have just used olive oil and there would have been no difference whatsoever. You can also cover them with salt at this point if you want. I know a lot of people like to do that as well. Okay, here we go. We have them in the oven. I'm cooking them at 350 for about an hour. You can also cook them at like 450, and then you cook them for like 45 minutes or something, a little bit less. It really depends on how you want to cook your potatoes and if you're in a hurry or not. You can also pre-cook them in the microwave and then bake them, or you can just cook them in the microwave and then do everything from there. So I've had these out on the cooling rack for about 15 minutes or so. So they've cooled down to the point that I can actually touch the potatoes. Potatoes, because of the high moisture content and the specific density of the potato innards, hold heat for a very long time, and I think that's where a lot of that hot potato comes from. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut all of our potatoes in half to begin with. This will also allow them to cool down quicker if they're a little bit on the hot side and they're still too hot to hold on to. But they were probably about the right temperature for me, so it wasn't too bad at this point in time. Okay, our next project is going to be to remove the innards of the potatoes. So what we're going to be doing is using our spoon here and working from the center out to the edges. And I find the good technique is to kind of turn the spoon and let it kind of do as like a prying action, and a lot of the time that will just get out large chunks of the flesh, while at the same time the curvature of the spoon follows the curve of the inner skin, preventing it from rupturing or tearing, because you really want to avoid all forms of tearing or rupturing when creating your twice baked potatoes. Because if you take out all the potato in the inside, the skin will just kind of collapse and then you kind of have nothing. Except for maybe mashed potatoes. Which is essentially what this is. It's mashed potatoes inside of baked potato shells. With a bunch of fancy stuff in it to make it taste amazing. Now you definitely want them to be hot at this point in time, but you don't want it to be so hot you can't handle it. So if it's a little bit too hot, just let it cool down for a few minutes before doing this. Okay, time to get started. So I'm just going to add a little bit of butter, some sour cream, and some regular cream to my potatoes, and just kind of see where that gets me. My sour cream is almost empty. I got more in the fridge if I need more, but this should be good. As far as making these type of potatoes, it's quite flexible. You just kind of mix different additives together and try to get it to taste kind of the way you want it to. And if you make a lot of mashed potatoes, it's kind of the same process for fine-tuning with what you want in it. I also have milk here that I might use, as well as cheese that I have out of frame. Some cheddar cheese. Monterey Jack also works pretty good for making twice baked potatoes. But I think the big thing is, as long as you get them nice and creamy and it tastes delicious, your potatoes will be delicious in the end. So mix things up, get a spoon in there, give it a little bit of a taste and see where you are, and then add accordingly. Salt and pepper is also not a bad thing to add at this phase as well. Other things that you can add to this would be if you cook down some onions, some bacon, some green onions. I'm going to be actually cooking this up and then freezing it so I can have it at a later date. So I'm not going to be adding any onions to this right now, because the onions don't really taste that good when you freeze them and then thaw them out. So that's just kind of something to be aware of, and taste it, see where you are, and then add accordingly. It seemed like it needed a little bit more salt. And of course now I'm going to add in my cheese. I'm just going to grate it in to it directly. If you don't want to do it this way, I'm probably using a box grater, then mixing it in would probably work a little bit better. And then just kind of give it a little bit of a stir to make sure it's all kind of spread out inside of the potato mixture. And give it another big mix now that our cheese is all added to it. And I decided to add more cheese, so a little bit more grating, a little bit more stirring. Just fine tune it to get it to kind of taste the way you want it. Just use a spoon to taste it, and then you're good to go, and we're good to move on to our next step. Okay, now it's time to move the potatoes into the shells. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a spoon, and we're going to start moving a little bit of the potato into each one, and then come back with a second pass and just make sure we get all the potatoes so it's nice and evenly divided, because it's very easy to overfill one and then not have enough to complete them all. So just take your time and stuff them all, and try to get them all evenly balanced as much as possible. Then we'll get out our cooking sheet and we'll put all of them on the cooking sheet. Now, I left the oven on this whole time, so it's still at 350 degrees, so I'm just going to stick these back in there. If you're doing the high temperature technique, lower the temperature for the second cooking, because if you cook them at 450 now, it kind of burns a little bit, so don't do that. A little bit of salt and pepper on the top, and then toss her in the oven. And now they are going to be twice baked. 350 degrees, 20 minutes or so. Just enough to kind of heat everything all the way through, and then should be perfect. And here's what they look like when they're done. Like I said before, you know, if you're not going to freeze them afterwards and you're going to be eating them right away, put the chives on top before you bake them, and you're good to go. Or if you don't like chives, make them this way. It's up to you. A lot of ways to do this. So let me know in the comments below how you make your twice baked potatoes. And if you like my content and would like to see more of it, please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.